go to the HomeKit in the market. So I think you saw Stuart present and talk about how the HomePod Mini and the Apple TV support Thread in the market. So since that announcement, so HomeKit was introduced with Wi-Fi and Bluetooth in 2014. Apple joined the Thread Group board in 2018. And a short 2 years later, they launched the first product in the market to support Thread with HomeKit. And since then, now as of today, there's 18 products in the market that are Thread certified with HomeKit. So you can kind of see the timeline there, the evolution, and it's really exciting to see all these products in the market now. I think many of you in here probably have these in your home also, and some of you will be lucky winners of some of these products at the end of the meeting. So next slide. So when our member companies release these products in the market, the HomeKit with Thread products, as the marketing VP and leading the marketing team, it was really great to start seeing how the market was responding to the benefits that Thread brought. And, you know, we had done messaging and positioning, but in the end, it was the users, when they saw these products and how they started talking about it, that drove home how we needed to update our messaging, but also just how they latched on to the key benefits right away. So I've put some quotes on here from different publications, and I will say there were too many to put all in one slide. You can find them all on our website, but you can see that there's a lot of focus on the speed of Thread, the usability of Thread, and the coverage that Thread provides. And these messages have really resonated across all of the different products that have been released. That's what they're promoting. Also, I don't know if I put it here, but the shared mesh idea, or the idea that it's a mesh that can be shared. You don't have to have the dedicated border router. You can use another company's border router. So you can use the HomePod Mini and have a Nanoleaf product working. So these are the messages that we heard from the market, and the market is really responding well. And I think they now start seeing the momentum around Matter and how Matter is addressing even more problems and really driving on the interoperability aspect. So next slide. So that's where we get into Matter. So timeline for Matter. Daniel is in here. We remember all the hard work, and Neil, you remember all this too, and having announced to be supporting Thread as the Zigbee cluster library over IP. The spec was released in 2018, and there were demos at CES, and we did some blogs and webinars. And that kind of led into Matter then, where how do we unite the ecosystems and have interoperability across ecosystems and brands. So in 2020, the Matter efforts kicked off. It was announced in December of 2019, but the first working group sessions within CSA, which was Zigbee Alliance at the time, started in 2020. And today we're expecting to see market products in the market with Matter and Thread by the end of the year, which is really, really exciting. So really fast timeline that you see with Matter and how it's accelerating. So I wanted to share all that, and a partnership with CSA has been in place since 2016. And even before that, we were talking to build that liaison and how we work together. And I think it's what we see is that the industry needs this collaboration, because we can reduce confusion, reduce complexity as we work together in the industry. And I think that Matter and Thread is a really key example of how that works. So with that, I think the next slide, I think I'm about to turn it over to Chris, unless I have, never mind. So Thread with Matter. So Thread, we talk about why Thread with Matter, and it really enables the low power devices to have reliable local connectivity with extended range. And I think Stuart brought this up, like one of the key aspects that Thread brings is this reliable mesh technology, so that you have the long range and also that self-forming, self-healing network. So it's, for the user experience, it's really clean. The low bandwidth data rate, so really focusing on battery life and reduced latency. So these are some of the key reasons why products would choose to use Thread with Matter. And now we have our guest speaker. Let me pull up his bio. But many of you probably already know and are familiar with Chris. So Chris is head of technology at CSA. He plays an integral role in several initiatives for the CSA, from recruiting and supporting new and expanding ecosystems to providing technical expertise and guidance in the marketing and developer programs. He has a strong and deep background in embedded systems, wireless, and the developer community. He's been working at Zigbee or 15.4 companies since 2004, most recently at Iris program at Lowe's, and he's been with CSA now for 4 years. So welcome, Chris.
Thanks, Sujana. So looking around the room, I think I see a number of people, in fact, lots of people who know this topic better than I do. So I'm going to try to do my best. I think I mentioned this to a couple of you guys. I live right near here, and I think that's why they invited me to talk instead of some of you guys. A little convenient. So I typically do this talk 3 or 4 times a week to prospective members of the Alliance. And I never do it with slides. Without the slides, I can talk for about an hour. With the slides, I'm lucky if I get 5 or 6 minutes out of it. So what I'm going to try to do is ask for questions. So anyone has any questions, please interrupt me whenever you want. There's no such thing as a dumb question. So yeah, with that, I'll move on. So what we focused on when we were trying to build Matter was to reduce the complexity in the Internet of Things, to try to simplify things for both consumers and for developers. Consumers have a serious problem today buying things. Is this thing going to work in my home? Do I have the right hieroglyphics on the back of this box in order to understand, in order to get that thing to work in my network? And developers have the same problem. They have a lot of complexity in terms of what they can develop or what would work. So we tried to simplify all that. So focusing on both of those things. So next slide. So let me tell you a little bit about the CSA, the Connectivity Standards Alliance. They used to be the Zigbee Alliance. Everybody in this room probably knows that. But back to the beginning of that, in the early 2000s, the DOE was releasing a lot of work. The IEEE was standardizing a lot of that. So there's lots of alliances that started around that same time, Z-Wave and Wi-Fi. All those kinds of alliances started around that same time frame with different focuses on those different standards. That was just exactly when the Zigbee Alliance started as well, and they started with the Zigbee radio. And then from there, as you can see, they moved into a number of areas, sort of focus areas, smart energy being one of the biggest ones over the years, but then also green power, where we focused on solving specific problems in the Internet of Things, like batteryless networks like that. But then moved into other areas. Zigbee 3.0 was sort of a consolidation of a number of different standards that we had at the time. But maybe the most important for this room is DOT. So I don't remember how many years it was at that point in time, but now 20 years of sort of development of how devices should interoperate with other devices. That evolved. It's called was called the Zigbee Cluster Library. That evolved into DOT, sort of a separate standard, and to a large degree, that work evolved into Matter. That's one of the pieces that's happening right now is Matter, and I'll talk a lot more about that later. But also Zigbee R23, sort of the next generation of what Zigbee is going to be as well. And certainly if anyone has questions about that, you can ask, but I'm not the right room. So next slide. So a little bit more about the CSA. Obviously I want to talk a little bit about Matter later. I think you know a lot about Zigbee. There's a couple of other things that we're working on. Both Zigbee and Matter use the same data model. So in order to allow development from both paths, Matter and Zigbee, to work on that, we've separated that out to its own working group, the data model working group. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But then another thing that we started about a year ago, a little less than that, is access control. So access control is another piece of the Internet of Things that we feel is necessary and is holding back the industry. It's the simplification of a credential representing a person or a thing sometimes. And so right now, the two primary radios that do that are NFC and ultra wideband. And each of those have their own separate use case teams, FIRA or the NFC Forum, that dictate their own credential and their own full technology stack. And that's extremely complicated for developers, both on the handset side as well as on the device side. So the point of the Access Control Working Group is to attempt to simplify that and create a single credential, a single technology stack with radios at the bottom. And it looks like that might actually be something that pushes forward to create to enable more radios to be used there. With that single technology stack, you can now potentially use Bluetooth or a new radio that Bluetooth is coming out with, or Wi-Fi radios or whatever else makes sense at that level. I'm trying to remember if I'm supposed to say this or not, but we've also started a new working group, which is focused on product security as well. If anyone has questions about that, you can find it later. So also, other than just the working group focuses that we have a number of interest areas. So we have a member group, China, that's focused on both two-way communication with the China market, both pulling in requirements from there. They just finished up some work on a new type of door lock that was sort of necessary in the area, in the region. But also there's lots of work out to the China region about the other work from the CSA. Recently, we started an EU interest group, which is sort of the same thing for the European market. And we have a number of industry stakeholder groups sort of slicing and dicing the membership in order to have, again, two-way communication from different areas like retail or devices versus ecosystems, that sort of thing. So next slide. So on the left here, I think it's left for you guys. Yeah, you see our board companies, a lot of which are represented on the board here as well, as you know. And then on the right, you see some of the again, sort of the slicing and dicing of the membership. I'll point out a couple things in terms of the regions. It's a really well-balanced set of companies from all over the world. I think it's 30% US, 30% Asia, and 40% Europe on that area. And then at the bottom, you see participation by the big group is devices versus blue is silicon and support, and then retail and ecosystems are the two smaller ones. So next slide. So let's dig in. What is Matter? And I guess more importantly, why did we do it? With Matter in particular, we tried to focus on two areas. And again, I mentioned this earlier, but consumer confusion and developer complexity. So we focused on IP, which has a lot to do with what you guys do. And that is the transport of the internet, which makes things in some degrees a lot simpler. I know some people in this room might debate that point, but to a degree from a device perspective, a lot simpler. But then also a common language of the Internet of Things. This was contributed by members and the CSA alike. So those two things put together enabled Matter, or will enable Matter, to tear down the walls of the walled gardens of the Internet of Things and make it easier for device developers to innovate and do creative things in the market, and then also for consumers to then buy those things, bring them home, and be sure that they will work in their homes. So next slide. So the four sort of key points are, as the slide says, simplicity, interoperability, reliability, and security. And I'll talk more about these in the next couple of slides. So simplicity well, actually, let me tip forward. We've already talked about interoperability a little bit, but reliability, I think, has a lot to do with what the thread group sort of brings forth there. The Matter specification has what they call fabrics sort of on top of both thread and Wi-Fi, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later too. But it is that reliability that really makes it easy for consumers to just go ahead and use in their homes. And I'll talk about security in the next slide, but simplicity is one that we've really strongly focused on. It has to really just work. So consumers have to be able to buy it, scan a barcode, use their Bluetooth to pair, and it has to show up on their network and do what it's supposed to do. And so that was really the key component of what we tried to do here. And then also I mentioned on the slide that it's not just a spec or a standard, it really is a whole toolkit. So there's a full SDK, the full implementation that's available to the world on GitHub. All that together is what makes it easier for developers to build products. And I think that's it for this slide. So next slide, please. So this picture you've seen a lot, and I'll probably stay on the slide a little bit. But as you see at the bottom, Matter supports Wi-Fi and Thread and Bluetooth for pairing. It supports Ethernet. I like to joke that it sort of came for free. There's really no work that was needed to be done for Ethernet. But there's been a lot of work, at least a lot of talk, let's say, on additional network support. So we've been forming a lot of liaisons with other groups that are interested in putting Matter over those protocols. Nothing which we can talk about, but it makes a lot of sense because of the design principles. At the bottom of our stack, there's really just UDP send commands. So, at that level, you guys do all the hard work in making sure those packets actually get where they need to go. And then on the device attestation, there's some work that we did. But beyond that, when it's actually just interoperable devices talking to each other, it's simply, we're just sending packets. And like I said, the work that you guys have done for the last couple of years, it really made that all work. And then at the top, we've talked about this as well. It's the Zigbee Cluster Library, or dot, that sort of brings all the devices together. And the 1.0 set of devices that we're targeting, so the class of devices we're targeting, are, as you see here, so smart plugs and light bulbs, blinds and shades, HVAC controllers, so in the thermostats as well as the in-wall, those things are called, but the in-wall air conditioner type units. And then I'll skip, so access control, so door locks and garage door openers, and then do-it-yourself security devices as well. And then there's a number of other things that we support, like televisions was something that was sort of added sort of towards the end, but we've got a lot of press on that last year during CES in terms of ways to cast, at least that's how the press sort of talked about it. And that's, like I said, that's been interesting, and we've got a lot of discussion about new groups and new work to be done in that area. But then also bridges and access points. Another place that we've got a lot of interest is just in controllers. So you get a controller to join your network, and it can then discover all the lights that are in your home. And then that controller can then control all the lights, or maybe the HVAC systems or other things like that. And those controllers can be embedded in everything. So, remember if there's anything else to say on this one. So I think I talked about everything else on another slide as well. So next slide. Right, so security. And the thing I'd like to talk about here is one of the first things we did in security, actually, let me rewind a little bit. So we were very much about interoperability. Obviously, I think that's what brought everybody to the table in order to work on Matter. But it really was security. So we had a couple of meetings way back before the pandemic, late 2019, early 2020, and security was what everybody was talking about. It had to be secure. Obviously we're going to solve the interoperability problem, but we had to make sure it was secure. So I believe the first groups that we set up were what we call a threat model tiger team. So we have that team that focuses on creating a threat model for all of Matter, the whole protocol itself, But then we formed, I don't know, 15 or 20 other teams. And that group also created threat models for all of those other, the output of all those other teams. So the device attestation group that's working on how devices pair, there's a threat model for that. And in each case of on these threats, they had to go back and figure out mitigations for them. In some cases, like AES-128 might be cracked someday, or was already cracked, but might be quickly cracked, in a functional manner. The mitigation for that might be, all right, well, next year, 2 years from now, or whatever else we need to move to better encryption, higher curves. And that's what speaks to the agility that we have. So this is the defense in depth sort of model here, that you have a layered approach to everything. And every one of those layers has to be easily swapped out in case some zero-day threat comes in. We need to handle it and then quickly improve something. That's all in the layered model. And then the other thing I'll mention here, I think lots of it's sort of obvious, but is easy. It has to be extremely easy for the developers and extremely easy for the users. As we found out in lots of cases in the past, if it's not easy, consumers or developers will just work around it and turn it off or do something really stupid. And therefore, you have no security whatsoever. So I think that's sort of enough for that slide there. In Matter 1.0 is on track, and I'll talk to that in about 2 slides here on what the schedules are for that. But what are we looking at for the future? Where there's been no loss of focus on those releases that are coming up in the next couple of months. But there has been also a lot of work sort of looking forward. So one of the sort of gaps for 1.0 has been cameras. And so now there's a group that's focused on cameras. We're collecting use cases for cameras right now and putting that together for future work on top of that. It's unclear if that's going to be a sort of a Matter 1.1 or a Matter 2.0 thing, but cameras are definitely a big focus area for us, if there's any interest in that as well. And another group that's had a lot of interest is energy management over Matter. So I look at it, and I probably should have said this earlier, so I'm the head of technology, but it is a member-driven organization. So the members decide, much like this organization here, so the members decide what they want to do, and I will sometimes say, this is a really good kind of thing we should be doing, and we should be going there. The members sort of go off and do whatever they want, regardless of what I say. But anyway, in energy management, what I think it should look like is sort of an energy management system type of a box or an app on a phone or something like that, or something living in the cloud that can discover all the flexible loads in your home. It can discover solar panels, all those types of things. And I should also imply that, should say that a lot of those are new device types for us. Electric vehicles is another really flexible load. We don't have electric vehicle chargers right now. So that's something that the work that is getting done, the same with solar panels, might also work with other groups to sort of adopt their standards, or at least work with them to come up with new standards. So anyway, some box in the home discovers all these devices and then just helps you save money. Right now, I believe, I don't have a Tesla, but right now I believe if you had a Tesla and you plugged it in the wall, it would just charge to 100%, regardless of what time of day it is, what the cost of energy is, what your solar panels are doing. And that's probably not the smartest way to do that. And so what I believe this should be doing is figuring out how to help you charge your Tesla so that you can get to the store or get to work, but you probably don't need it 100% all the time. So maybe charge to 30, 40%, make sure that you can take that emergency run to the grocery store, but then maybe not charge in the middle of the day, wait till the middle of the night, or wait till your solar panels are kicking out a lot of extra energy and then finish charging your car. Now with two-way charging, that whole thing gets a little more complicated, where maybe you might want to pull energy from the car as well in order to save money from not buying energy from the grid. So that's a really big group for us. Sometimes we have as many as 50 or 60 people on that call as well. So if people are interested in that, again, we're just looking into use cases now and looking to develop that work in, like I said, a future Matter release. So a couple other things that we're working on here. There's robot vacuums. There's an appliances working group, and a couple of other areas there. two pieces that I'm trying to get started, and I just need a couple of companies that to sort of raise their hands and help get that work started, but is water management and home health care. I believe that with a single network like Matter in your home, those are going to be two big growth areas in the coming years. So that's it for that slide. And so, broadly speaking, what Matter does, and I mentioned this earlier as well, but for consumers, it makes it easier to buy a device and be confident that you can bring it home and that it will work. There's a multi-admin feature which allows you to support multiple ecosystems in your home at the same time. But again, I think I keep coming back to how consumers struggle today. I mean, I've done it myself. You buy a device, you think it'll work with one of your ecosystems, and it doesn't. I have all the ecosystems in my home, so it just means I have to go to the next device. It being the standard that all of these ecosystems are adopting, that is really the key here. For developers, again, I used to work at Iris, we mentioned, and we had to build 4 of every device. So the management said, oh, we need a smart plug. I had to make 4 smart plugs because it had to work with HomeKit, it had to work with all these different things. And so now that should change. Hopefully that would just be Matter devices that you develop once and deploy everywhere, as it says there. And retailers, I think, get the same benefit. You don't have to be educating consumers. You don't have to be dealing with returns when those devices that someone thought would work with some ecosystems and it doesn't. Those then get returned. And as most of you know in this room know, most IoT returns get thrown away, right? It's almost impossible to sort of rejuvenate an IoT returned device. And then for another one of these sort of future-proof things is for commercial builders and landlords. Those are other use cases that we're looking into in addition to broader commercial support. And then this last slide is on the schedule. We in 2021 we finalized the specification itself. I shouldn't say finalized. We balloted the specification at the 0.7 status, so that draft is now available to members. Later, I guess was late last year, earlier this year, we've sort of transitioned over to more of the test side of things. So now we're just about to start our 9th test event. We finished our 8th test event. The 9th one will be the last test event. And then at the completion of that is when we'll go to 0.9 ballot. And then that spec as well will be made available to all members. And then during the summer, we'll go to what we call the specification validation event, which will be the final event, sort of a clean run through. In some of the test events, we sometimes do the Julia Child swap. You use this device to test case 1 and that device to test case 2. That's not allowed in a specification validation event. So it'll be a clean test event run through for both of the devices, as well as the test harness and all the test cases. All that has to line up, and then that will then bring us to the fall where Matter 1.0 will be released. So that's it for me on all the pieces I had to talk to, and I know I spoke really quickly. I apologize for that. So any